Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you've joined us. I see some familiar names in attendance, and I see some people that are that I haven't met yet, and I'm glad everyone's here. The work of this committee is important work. I think what enabling a safe global food supply chain is a powerful and noble task, and I'm very proud to be a part of this through the work we're doing in the AIM Track and Trace Committee. I'll talk to you a little bit more at the end specifically about what it is that we're doing, what our mission, our message, and what kind of activities we're engaging in. But first, Mike is going to speak with us about AIM more generally. And so, Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, welcome to the AIM Track and Trace Meet and Greet. I'm Mike Ellen. I'm the Member Engagement Manager of AIM. Also joining us today, I know she just spoke, but Elizabeth Sinclair, who is the Vertical Marketing Manager at Seagull Scientific, as well as AIM's Chair to the Track and Trace Committee. Today we'll be talking about the Track and Trace Committee, but first let me tell you a little bit more about AIM. AIM, the Association for Automatic Identification and Mobility, is the premier source of industry support for the automatic identification market. For more than 40 years, companies have joined AIM Inc. to lead the growth of our industry. AIM serves as a hub for quality resources covering all types of barcode, RFID, and mobile computing information. We also serve as an incubator for new auto ID innovations that grow the market. AIM delivers trusted resources that connect you to new customers and business partners. Our mission is to be an unbiased resource for networking, education, advocacy, and standards. AIM helps members grow their business by fostering the effective use of automatic identification and data capture solutions. A little more on the company's history. AIM started as AIM USA over 40 years ago as a manufacturers association. Now we are the industry association for all AIDC stakeholders. We work with not only manufacturers, but also academic institutions, end users, system integrators, government agencies, et cetera, et cetera. We work with all AIDC stakeholders. For all these groups we work with, AIM maintains an unbiased, professional, and innovative organization that creates leadership, educational materials, and standards. As you can see, we are a global organization featuring over 400 members worldwide. That's just some of our members listed right there. Big companies, smaller companies, all companies pretty much. Our global leadership is already far-reaching, but is anticipated to expand to the Far East, France, Middle East, and the United Kingdom. And these are the committees that we work on, the committees that help form the standards of today and the ones that will be used tomorrow. I personally work with the RFID Experts Group, as well as the Technical Symbology Committee, IoT Committee, and the Track and Trace Committee, which we are going to talk about more today. AIM is also an active member of ISO and IEC, as well as other organizations. And now Elizabeth Sinclair is going to speak with you about the mission of the Track and Trace Committee.
Hi, everybody, again. And this is really, again, I'm very happy everyone's in attendance today. This is really going to be just a very brief overview. Let's start by telling the story about how the Track and Trace Committee started. A couple years ago, before PAC Expo East, Mary Lou called me, Mary Lou Bosco, the COO of AIM, to ask about what kind of messaging I thought AIM should be concentrating on and communicating to the people in attendance at PAC Expo. In my previous life, I managed marketing for a $1 billion a year food ingredients provider, and I have been so I was well immersed in the issues of food, and also we had a $1 billion pharma ingredients business. And so I was well versed in the issues, the regulatory issues for the food industry and also the pharma industry. I told Mary Lou that she should be talking about FSMA, about track and trace, about the DSCSA in pharma, and I'm afraid I went a little overboard, and yeah, I was pretty passionate. And when I finished my diatribe after a few seconds, Mary Lou recovered and she said, "Wow, I don't think we knew about those things." So I sent one of my colleagues to the next board meeting of AIM at Mary Lou's request to just talk about what the market for auto ID technology, at least in the food and the pharma sectors, this peculiar part of FDA regulation and global regulation, where our niche was, what the opportunity looked like, and what was going to be happening in the markets over the course of the next 5, 10, and 20 years, what the projections looked like. About a week later, Mary Lou called me and she said, "Elizabeth, the board has decided to start a track and trace committee, starting with food." And I was thrilled. I thought that was just the best news I ever heard. And she said, "And the even better news is they've decided that you should be chairperson," which, so I didn't really know exactly how to respond to that. That hadn't been my goal. But here we are. So what is our mission on the Track and Trace Committee? We want to be a resource to the food industry, and I should make it very clear right away that we are starting with the food industry. We hope to expand to be having these same conversations with the pharma industry, but because the conversations you have with the food industry and the pharma industry are a little bit different, we're starting with food. The enabling technology is the same. We all work in that sector, and we know the enabling technology for any kind of track and trace, whether it's aerospace, IUID, UDI. The technology is all the same, but we need to craft our messages carefully, and we're going to start with food and have that conversation with this industry first. And fortunately, we've had tremendous response. This is an industry that is flailing about trying to find an answer. So we want to be an educational resource about how technology can enable track and trace compliance with regulations like the U.S. Food Safety Modernization Act, and the EU's General Food Law, the People's Republic of China Food Safety Law. Everybody is enacting food safety laws globally, and the penalties that are being levied for companies that aren't in compliance or who generate food safety incidents because of their lack of care have gotten pretty serious. There are CEOs that are going to prison in the U.S. for not behaving and handling recalls appropriately. And in other parts of the world, things worse than going to prison are happening. So we certainly have a timely message for this industry. So we also are tasked with finding the best technology implementation practices. My hope is that within the next 24 months that we have a library of best practices white papers that we can use to as part of our outreach to the food industry. And then cultivating relationships with regulatory agencies and industry experts. So I think when AIM got involved in UDI, they were in early to the game and got very involved with FDA and really influenced the way the final rule looked. They really helped to shape it. I feel like this committee, now FSMA was enacted in 2010, so we're a little late to the game, but as I'm sure you all know, sometimes FDA's implementation of these rules that they've created it does not necessarily happen in a timely manner. So the final rules have been issued, but there's still scrambling trying to figure out how they're going to comply. So I feel very strongly that despite our lack of influence on what the final rules look like, we certainly will be able to help shape the global discussion. on using auto ID technology to facilitate global food safety. And so our next slide, please, Mike. So, what is our message? It's pretty clear. The upstream and downstream traceability requirements of global regulations are placing immense strain on a community that still relies heavily on manual spreadsheet and even index card-based supply chain tracking. The food industry lags severely behind other regulated and non-regulated industries in their supply chain automation and interoperability initiatives. No current food safety regulations require an automated tracking process. However, most experts believe it's just a matter of time before automation provisions are enacted into track and trace law. One of the pressures that we're looking at that companies are facing is they have a need to be able to provide, in the case of a mock recall, an audit, or an actual recall, where a product came from one node downstream and where it went up one node upstream in the supply chain, and within 24 hours. And there are harsh penalties if you can't. And if, in the horrible case that there's a food safety recall and you're unable to comply with this regulation of, in 24 hours, where after my product left here, where did it go? That's you've subjected yourself not only to regulatory penalties, but also to civil suit, perhaps criminal action. The other thing we need to keep in mind is the food supply chain isn't binary. Food doesn't just come from one node downstream, arrive at a facility, and then go to the next place in a straight line. What we see is, in the case of maybe pollock that's fished out of Alaska, that could be going 20 different places after it leaves the facility. It could be going to Asia to go into surimi. It could go in pet food in Europe. It could go to the fishmonger in the U.S. It's an ingredient in so many different things. So let's think about the pressures they're facing, having to be able to define where a product went within 24 hours. Personally, I don't see a way for them to comply with this, with the current manual state of supply chain tracking that they're using. One big difference we see in the food industry as opposed to other industries that we've worked with, like, for example, the medical devices industry for UDI compliance, is that the top 50 manufacturers globally for food own less than 20% of market share. So this is a community of small to mid-sized businesses that maybe don't have the resources. I mean, when we look at a company like Kellogg's or Coca-Cola, they have cross-functional teams in place already to look at how to solve these kinds of problems. Our messaging, well, we still want to be a resource to companies like that. I think our real sweet spot here is this preponderance of global food manufacturers, 3PLs, haulers, storers, cold storage, fishers, ranchers, farmers that aren't in the Fortune 500 list. There's such a tremendous need. I mean, right now, many fisheries in the U.S. still use first-generation Kanban cards to track where they pull the fish out of the hole in the ocean. So that's index cards. They're using index cards to follow the fish through the supply chain. And I just don't see a way that that fisheries that are using Kanban cards, or even companies that are using, something a little more sophisticated like an Excel spreadsheet, are going to be able to comply with the global tracing regulations. So the next issue is depth of data, and if you've ever spent any time working with the food industry, what they care about is label claims. FDA is pretty tight about what you can put on a label, and if you put something there that's in any way of a gray area, they're very, very serious about it. I have to say it's easy from a food safety standpoint right now to pick on Chipotle because they've been front and center in bungled PR and poorly managed recalls. But you know, a great example of label claims, depth of data enabling the label claims, is I think 18 months ago Chipotle launched a campaign called GM Over It, and they claimed that its supply chain was completely GMO free. And so if you were a person who was worried about ingesting GMOs, you could have anything you wanted at Chipotle and not worry about ingesting any GMOs. Well, here's the problem, is that they didn't really have a good understanding of their supply chain. They didn't have good data to look at. Maybe they did, but it never got as far as the marketing people that designed this campaign, nor the powers that be that approved it. Because the piggies that eat that become the carnitas at Chipotle are fed corn and soy-based feed. Corn and soy, most corn and soy, over 90% of corn and soy in the world now is genetically modified, genetically engineered. So right there, they had a problem there. The other thing that they didn't stop to consider is the soft drinks in their fountain are sweetened with HFC, high fructose corn syrup. And so they got sued. They're facing a huge class action suit. I'm certain one among many that they're facing. And it's simply a matter of not understanding their supply chain and how it works. So again, our answer to them is that our technology can enable their compliance with regulatory traceability requirements. Automation provides cost-saving process efficiencies. A well-deployed system is going to help these companies capture efficiencies they hadn't even considered. For example, the ability to capture efficiencies in transportation by understanding the weight of every load and being able to track it throughout the system. Companies are doing a wonderful job of savings in petrol expenditures. There are all kinds of things that they haven't considered. I mean, they see the stick. The stick is FDA and other global industries. Comply with this regulation or you're in big trouble. I think we have a carrot here, is that our technology is not only going to make complying with the global regulations easy, but they're going to experience process and cost savings, and everybody likes to hear that. And then I think the other powerful message we have is that we've done this before. We understand traceability with UDI, with pharma. I will say that one of the advantages that UDI had over food traceability, at least in its current state in the US, is that UDI prescribed a syntax, if you will, and a taxonomy for traceability, what it was going to look like. And in the food sector, they haven't defined any kind of system. So what we see is a lot of companies jumping up and inventing their own traceability schemas, you know. So we're going to use these numbers to identify lot number, and we're going to put this in there and that in there. I can say, and this is actually something that that many of the companies that I've talked to really struggle with. The key here for this industry is going to be creating an interoperable supply chain, and a bunch of homegrown ID schemas is just going to confound the matter. So GS1 is actually doing some pretty strong work, and sometime we anticipate that they're actually going to publish a standard for supply chain tracking for the food industry. But again, this is a place where they're really struggling. But and I have to say is when I do talk to some of these companies, they're very reassured by the fact that they're not the first ones out of the gate trying to handle this. So our next slide, please, Mike. So our activity, so far, we look to have a much more robust menu of activities as we get more engagement with partners like the people in attendance in this call. We are participants in the AIM Buyer's Guide. We're getting ready to launch a food tracking and tracing -food section that will make providers who supply food track and traceability solutions searchable online. We had a long and rich discussion about that yesterday, about, calling it track and trace seems great until berry farmer comes on your website trying to figure out how these people can help him or her, and berry farmers might not call it track and trace. So we're being very careful to avoid jargon, particularly because, again, the market, the preponderance of the market we're serving are small to mid-sized companies that may lack a level of technological sophistication that we see in our UDI customers. We're working on an AIM webpage. We have a LinkedIn group that has not really gained much traction, but I don't think that I certainly haven't spent enough attention there, and we're working on that. And then other things that we're looking at now are putting together a series of podcasts, and then particularly speaking opportunities at things like the local Institute of Food Technology sections. The IFT is the global group of food scientists. This organization is so interested in how traceability is going to enable food safety and enable their companies to achieve regulatory compliance. I think they have something like 70 local chapters in the U.S. They're always looking for speakers. So we're looking to position our committee members around the U.S. to go speak to these monthly meetings. The Food Safety Summit 2016 was just a couple weeks ago. I attended, Mary Lou attended. It was a tremendous show that had little to no presence for automation technology as recently as the 2015 show. The 2016 event, we're starting to see a lot of our partners and competitors showing up, understanding that this is a place where we need to be. And we anticipate that in 2017 we'll see a whole lot of automation technology discussion going on. Mary Lou is working with the organizers of this meeting to put together an AIM panel to run a panel discussion at next year's conference. And I can also say, our meetings have been a pretty great resource for those of us who've been in attendance lately. We've had a couple of presentations from GS1 over the last 3 meetings, I think, where they've presented information that's not necessarily publicly available yet. And I think for the members that have been dialing into these conferences or meetings, that's been a tremendous benefit. Another benefit that we're offering our members is on our website, which will be getting more rich and robust by the day. We've started a section for case studies where our member companies can post food safety case studies that they've written or white papers. So again, I think that's a tremendous benefit for our members. I also think that's a tremendous benefit for the AIM Track and Trace Committee, because it shows that we're plugged into global expertise in food track and trace. I think it's a tremendous resource for our industry, the industry that we want to talk to. So, so I've talked a little longer than I anticipated I would, but it's much like that first conversation I had with Mary Lou. This is a segment that I'm very passionate about, maybe because I like to eat and also because I don't like to get sick. But I'd ask if I can answer any questions for anyone. I'd love to. And if I don't know the answer, I will certainly find out for you. So I will open up the floor to questions.
This is David Dijak with the National Environmental Health Association. Thank you both for a very clear and logical presentation. I appreciate whenever someone can pull that off, because I know it took work to get to that point. To what degree do you folks, are you linked with the, is it called the GCC, the General Coordinating Council? I think it's run by the FDA with Homeland Security that is pondering some of the issues that you just described.
I think that we are tied into them in other industries. We are not tied into them yet in the food industry. This committee is a very new endeavor on the part of AIM, and we're still trying to get our footing. We've reached out to the Global Food Traceability Organization and also to the Global Food Safety Initiative, which is a retail and manufacturing led initiative. But the GCC, I don't know, Mike, I don't know how involved we are with them in our UDI endeavors. Can you speak to that?
I mean, in terms of the track and trace, in terms of food, no, we're not really involved with them yet. We're involved with them more on the IoT side of things. We've been working mostly with GS1, as Elizabeth said earlier. We had a speaker from GS1 yesterday talk about some of the things that they had worked on in Copenhagen, and they're very interested in our group and are doing a lot for us. So we're going to continue working with them in the future, and we are trying to get other groups in as well.
Yep, we have very active participation from GS1. It's something that I'm very pleased about.
Thank you. One clarification question. Did I capture correctly that the 500 largest food, and I may use the wrong term, manufacturers control about 20% of the market, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, no, the top 50 own about 20% of market share.
Got it.
So, which again speaks to the fragmented nature of this industry, and we actually see much more fragmentation in APAC and in EMEA than we do in the U.S. They're just a network of small food manufacturers, trucking companies, growers, ranchers, fishers. It's really quite a remarkable contrast with what we see in the UDI space and in the pharma space, where I'm beginning to feel like eventually we're just going to have one giant global pharma company and one giant global medical device company with all the M&A activity that's been going on, which is, of course, hyperbole, but still.
George Orwell would love you. I have one final question, but I'll defer to the other callers.
Elizabeth,
Sure.
I'm wondering, this is Tim Lidell. I'm wondering when the next food safety seminar is in 2017. Is that information we can get?
Let me look it up. I believe the next Food Safety Summit is in May, and I can't remember where it's going to be. I can look it up really quickly.
I'd like to find out just from a standpoint of involvement, to understand.
Yeah, it was a great event. Okay. Let's see if I know they've published it. Okay.
That can be a subsequent follow-up if you got it.
Sure.
Sorry, guys. I have that the next Food Safety Summit is May 9th to 11th in Rosemont, Illinois, at the Donald Stevens Convention Center.
Okay. Yeah, that's the convention center right next to O'Hare.
Yeah, so that'll be May 9th through 11th, 2017.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions we can entertain before we let everyone get along with their day?
One final question from Dave Dijak. I represent boots on the ground retail food inspectors all across the U.S. and the U.S. territories, including the U.S. military. I'm kind of new to food. We do food amongst other things that are related to environmental health, but what do I take away from what you just presented? I mean, because I can relate to it, we are focusing on informatics writ large over the next 12 months. Was this an FYI, or is there an action that something I should be thinking about relative to this technology and you folks in particular?
I think the goal of this meeting, we called it a meet and greet. We're looking to introduce the food industry, because we would like to have more participation for the food industry, and solution providers to the food industry. We'd love to have more active participation in our food track and trace work, the work that we discussed during the course of this presentation. So I think that our real message here, at least from the standpoint of being solution providers, is it's that carrot and the stick. The stick is you've got to comply with these regulations, and it's not going to be pretty if you can't. But the carrot is automation technology is the answer. If you're going to comply, you need to figure out a way to automate your systems. We can help you do that, and you're going to uncover amazing efficiencies that you hadn't considered previously. So end goal, more participation for our committee, something that we are very selfish and enthusiastic about. But overall, the messages that we need to use to reach out to the industry so that we can help them and enable a safer global food supply chain.
Very good. Mission accomplished. I will say in closing that AFDO, who you probably know, the Association of Food and Drug Officials, is meeting in Pittsburgh at the end of June, and the International Association for Food Protection meets in St. Louis at the end of July.
Yeah, I just got their brochure yesterday, actually.
Many of the same players, I think, will be there, but the IAFP has a global footprint, including China, so very interesting.
Yep. Yep, food safety is if you talk to people about regulations, people either like regulations or they don't like regulations. I think more people don't like regulations until you start talking about food safety regulations, and globally people are really in favor of food safety regulations because, again, everybody's got to eat. So I see just tremendous opportunity for us for AIM, and particularly for the Track and Trace Committee, to really start helping the industry enable a safe global food supply chain. And there's no arguing with that being a good thing. So,
good. Thank you.
David, this is Tim Liddell. I can answer a little bit of your question about some of the initial, how is this starting, where's the involvement. Me and my company have been involved in the UDI and the pharmaceutical markets, along with the FDA, that are coming along. And a lot of this, what we're seeing, well, at least I'm seeing in the food industry, is that it's all kind of in the same, happening the same way it did under UDI. People are going, well, what good is this for me? Why do I need to do that? And so there's a lot of similarity in that. Over time, it evolves, and we know that in UDI they are using automated identification techniques. The pharmaceutical track and trace that's coming along is looking at serialized control at certain levels. So the AIDC barcode type of things are becoming involved, and it's at the ground level now where really this industry could start to learn a lot of lessons from what the other industries have in association with the FDA, and making your job easier, I would think, by going through the processes it sounds like you have to go through. Because, as Elizabeth said, there are tremendous efficiencies to be gained by the automatic identification techniques, and And so I think there's a good association we should have with your company, your association, on getting some of these ground rule things maybe better understood before the proper people, the proper committees, and I know our company would be interested in being involved with that with you if there's a way to do that, and I'm sure Elizabeth and this committee would be involved in doing that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I don't want to delay this call, but we have an annual conference. We're expecting 1,200 people starting this weekend. For next year, though, maybe we could talk about a session which would promote this. About 20% of our members are from private industry, most of those from the food sector.
That's great.
I'd be interested. Yeah, that sounds very good.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thanks for sticking it out for our whole call. I appreciate that, David. So I guess with that, we've gone at least 11 minutes over what we had scheduled, and probably 20 minutes longer than what I had assumed. If there are any further questions, or if you'd like to get in touch with me to talk more about the committee and our work, you can work through Mike. We'll be happy to connect the dots and make sure that we're all having the right conversations and with the right people. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you at our monthly meetings.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Well, thank you.